Just make sure it sounds sexy, Tibbs.
Lord Almighty, how can you stand Arizona? Your fair skin must be burning down into your absent soul. Mike, we can barely hear you. It sounds to me like you called us from inside a hole.
Except who's on the computer.
But your phone calls lift me higher, like the ERA of Mark Pryor.
Blasphemy.
Your hair looks like it's on fire. You're Mike Ferrin. You're just a hunker
For the first time this year, in the spirit of this being the final weekend scheduled to have nonstop major American team sports in competition for the foreseeable future, we welcome back for our regular weekly segment the great Mike Ferrin of Sirius XM MLB's Network Radio and the Arizona Diamondbacks home radio network. Emphasis on home because everything will be done at home. Sure. How you doing, Mike?
Wait a second. I want to know, did you guys want to do video because you wanted to see me or because you know that the quality is better than my phone?
Little column A, little column B.
Is that where it came from?
Maybe.
Now that we actually get to see you, I was told you were a ginger, and it's even in the song. Your hair doesn't look that red.
No, you see it in the beard. Look, if I get like this,
I feel like
you
I
can
was lied
see
to.
it. There it is. No. It's just it's not as red on top.
That's how I am, Mike.
Got it.
My beard is red. My hair on top of my head is brown.
Fire on the hole.
Yeah.
Fire in the hole, indeed. So last week, week and a half ago, whenever it was, when Major League teams started to show up, one of the big stories was teams not getting their test results back in a timely fashion, waiting several days. We've now gone another week or week and a half since that whole process. Have things kind of leveled out? Have they smoothed out to the point where there's now some confidence that Major League Baseball has with its partners in Utah? And at least it seems like to me there's not as much of the consternation there was a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, you know what's funny is that it seems to the couple of teams that it has happened to repeatedly seem to be the ones that it keeps happening to. So like the Cubs yesterday had half a dozen tests that were late. Houston today hasn't gotten a return on George Springer's test, so he's not working out with them. And that was after, yesterday they had some delays and they've had some delays before. So I don't know if that's necessarily the testing protocol or something that's going on with, where the shipments are coming from those teams. So yeah, I do think, I disagreed a little bit with Chris Bryant's comments, saying, oh, this part of the beginning, this is the easy part. What happens when we travel? Nobody's done this before, right? So like you were going to have some hiccups. Now, it was a bad look not having the shipping stuff figured out over the 4th of July weekend, because I don't know if you guys know this, but 4th of July happens on the same date every year.
What?
Really?
I know it's hard to believe based on the fact that it's July 4th. Yeah. So I think that's one of the factors that certainly played in the beginning part. But now that they are into more of a routine, it does seem to be going more smoothly. And I think the fact that you're seeing when guys test positive that they're taken out right away, I think as we get further away from the intake, there's less of a chance that you missed somebody in intake or that they weren't COVID positive yet, even though maybe they had been exposed to the disease before that. So I think as we go along here, I think there's better chances of it happening. And I allow myself to get a little bit more excited every day because I think now that you get the routine down, and it's going to make it easier. The next challenge will be traveling, and not from the standpoint necessarily of the actual travel and going to the hotels and getting on planes and stuff like that, but how do you handle the testing protocol for home and road teams? I think that's something that's going to be interesting to follow over the course of this weekend when you start seeing some exhibition games.
Yeah, Mike, kind of along those lines, following Major League Baseball and the NBA right now, I think is pretty interesting when you have the bubble component and then you have a non-bubble component with Major League Baseball. What have you been able to gather from people inside the sport, whether it's umpires, managers, players that will be traveling, in terms of kind of how they're handling the day-to-day life? Because in the NBA, they're all locked into this one area. And so once you get in, hopefully everything's going to be okay. How are they handling things as simple as going to the grocery store or going to the ballpark? How is that working out?
Yeah, I mean, I think we still have a lot of answers that need to come on that, because it's all fine and good to talk while you're at home and you're going through summer camp. But what happens when you're on the road and you're on a 2-city road trip, that handles that? I mean, I think for the most part, most of the teams and the players are saying the right things, in that they're saying we need to take this seriously. This is important. It could impact our teammates and our competition. What happens when you actually get into the course of the season? What happens when you get into week 6 and maybe your team isn't playing that well? What happens to your family when you are gone and maybe they let their guard down a little bit in some of these states that things may not be as under control, and then you come home, and what if you get exposed then? I think those are all questions that we don't know the answers to yet. But as of right now, I think everybody has taken it pretty seriously. And I think that there are I have heard stories of a couple of organizations having to sit down with a player that resisted and was basically like, listen, you have to do this or you can't play. And for a number of players, they still want to be able to make their salaries. If they're engaged to this point, they want to be able to make the money that they have that's coming to them this year. And for those who might be free agents following the season, want to be able to cash in on that as well. So I do think that that's an important part of the conversation. And for the most part, I think teams have gotten the right responses from players.
Mike Ferrin joining us from Sirius XM MLB Radio. The Dodgers and Nationals are each missing about a handful of guys. I think it's 8 for LA and 7 for Washington, or maybe it's vice versa, because of the more stricter quarantine protocols in D.C. and Los Angeles County. I know that Juan Soto and Victor Robles are not yet reported for Washington. Kenley Jansen, who did test positive for COVID-19 several weeks ago, has just recently joined the Dodgers. I have the feeling LA should be okay because they're so deep, but with the Nationals already in a little bit of a state of flux, does this just make the title defense that much more difficult?
Well, I mean, I think if they were to lose Soto or Robles for any extended period of time, what we don't know is whether or not they have tested positive or not, or if they are being held out because of those city protocols. And I do, just as a caveat on that, I'm a little bit curious as to how much conversation teams had with their local municipalities about what those rules were going in. One of the issues that the Toronto Blue Jays are having right now is that the restrictions in Ontario are far more significant than they are basically in any metropolitan area in the United States. And travelers to Canada need to quarantine for 2 weeks, and they have not been given clearance as of yet to have home games there during the regular season as a result. So that's kind of one of the things that I'm more curious about than anything. I don't know how it impacts them. We still have 10 days to go until the regular season starts. If Juan Soto shows up tomorrow, or Victor Robles shows up tomorrow, or AJ Pollock shows up tomorrow, I don't know that it necessarily has that significant an impact, but I would like to know how much the teams have had contact with their local municipalities over, these restrictions when you are in places like DC and LA, and how that might impact them if they have somebody that tests positive on the road.
Mike, I remember a few months ago, really early on in this process, we talked about the beginning of the season and, who would come out strong and maybe who would come out a little slow in terms of player by player. We had Ty Block on before the injury happened a couple of weeks ago, and he thought that all of this weirdness would benefit pitchers early. What have you heard from folks inside of Major League Baseball in terms of who might get off to decent starts, whether it's pitchers or batters or certain teams? How do you think that that's going to go next week?
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you in terms of teams who's going to start fast and who's not. I mean, I never see. Outside of like the A's always starting slow and them realizing that they really can't this year. I'm not sure that I can really bet on any of that as to what's going to happen. I mean, pitchers tend to be ahead of the hitters, and at least in what little hitter squads that I've watched to this point, that seems to have been the case. Although I will also add that the ball really does seem to be flying again this year. I don't know if you heard about that last year, that the ball seemed to fly, but like there have been there was a crazy moment yesterday in the Tigers inter squad where Riley Green, who was their first round draft pick from a year ago, robbed CJ Cron of a home run. But if you watch Green's route, he thinks it's going to be a routine fly ball down the left field line. Then all of a sudden he's got to beeline it for the wall. So I think the ball is carrying. Maybe that helps to take some of it away, but there's been big strikeout totals to this point, which I think tells you a little bit about where the timing is for hitters. And I think that it's fair to say, especially if teams are going to go to the bullpen more early, that pitchers have a chance to be ahead of the hitters in that first week of the year or so. But it'll even out. That tends to even out relatively quickly. So.
The central pod, we'll call it, because that's what it is from a scheduling standpoint, looks mighty fascinating because you've got what was already expected to be a wide open National League Central, the American League Central, maybe with the White Sox coming back, the Twins are obviously there, Cleveland, but I want to look at two teams specifically out of that group. Cincinnati and Milwaukee. The Reds made a lot of aggressive moves, probably one of their better off seasons they've had in a long time. Milwaukee had a makeover that was almost more by attrition than anything else. Which of those two do you trust more to make a playoff run in a 60-game season? Because the Brewers still have a core of experienced guys who've been through it, whereas the Reds, this is all going to be first-timer for them.
I think Cincinnati, to me, has more talent. And while they might be first-timers together, Castellanos, Moustakas, they have playoff experience. Trevor Bauer has playoff experience. It's not like they're devoid of that overall. Even Eugenio Suarez in Detroit had playoff experience. So I think that I don't really think the experience factor is there. I just think they're a more talented team. The Brewers have gone at it in an effort to try and replicate production by basically platooning their way to success. And I'm really curious to see how that plays in a short season. They've done a very nice job of it, or at least they did 2 years ago, in finding ways to succeed. Last year, they had more star power because replacing Yasmani Grandal isn't easy. And I get that Armar Narvaez, who they acquired from Seattle, had a very good year last year, high on base percentage, 22 home runs. But he's not the receiver behind the plate that Grandal is, and I'm not sure that he can hit fourth or fifth in a quality lineup the way that Grandal could. So I think, to me, it's the safer bet is on Cincinnati. But that said, Milwaukee has a lot of options pitching wise. They have a lot of options on the offensive side, and they have a tremendous manager who seems to know when to push the right buttons. And they still have star power in that they've got, Christian Yelich anchoring the offense. Keston Hiura, I think, is on his way to being a well above average offensive second baseman, and Josh Hader and Brandon Woodruff anchoring the pitching staff. So I think that there's a possibility for Milwaukee. I just, I don't know that their ceiling is quite as high as what Cincinnati's is, but their floor might be, 28 wins, which puts them right in the mix, anyway. I'm guessing 33 wins gets you into the playoffs this year. So
I would agree.
Mike, going back to something we were talking about earlier, I don't know if you had an expectation on the number of guys that would opt out. Was it higher or lower than what you expected it to be a few months ago?
Well, I would say so. I tried to use the NBA and their percentages as a guideline, and so I think that there may be some players that still opt out. We're 10 days away, right? So from that standpoint, I think it's a little bit low because I think the numbers are fairly similar, right? We've only seen one player that's opted out because they're high risk, and that was Jordan Hicks of the Cardinals, who opted out yesterday. But I think we were at a dozen or 13 guys, and I figured that the percentage would be more like, I would say more like 50 players around there was the number that I was guessing, which is not a particularly big percentage when you're talking about 1,800 players that are coming into camps, with the 60-man expanded pool. But I think it's been a little bit lower in that regard. I'm curious to see what happens. I don't think it's a surprise that most of the guys that have opted out, the highest percentage, are guys that are fully vested in the pension, have at least 10 years of service time, and have been on guaranteed contracts or have guaranteed contracts. The more interesting ones to me are like Joe Ross and Michael Kopech. Kopech opted out this week and has not given an explanation yet. Not that he needs to, but that one, he's only got a year of service time. Ross is arbitration eligible. He's giving up his service time, but it's also understandable when you consider that his mother is an ER doctor and his father is a pediatrician. And maybe they've got a pretty good sense of what the hell is going on. She's an ER doctor or an ER nurse in Oakland, which, the Bay Area was a major hotspot when this first started. So maybe the Rosses and Tyson opted out, even though he was released by the Giants. Like maybe the Ross brothers have it right. So we'll see. But I do think that that's one of the more interesting aspects of it is that, it's generally been veteran guys who are established.
Well, and speaking of that, the Braves were hit hard. I mean, Freddie Freeman's out. Markakis decided to opt out. And because of the pod system, they're playing all these Eastern Division teams. So they get to see the Nats, they get to see the Mets, plus they get, all the American League East teams. Does it just not look good for the Braves this year to get back to the postseason?
Well, let me just give you some breaking news here in the last couple of minutes. Mark Feinsand from MLB.com reporting that Puig, your right fielder for the Atlanta Braves, Yasiel Puig, is going to Atlanta. So, I mean,
Stibbs, come on. Where was the sports flag?
Dude, I mean, like think about this from like just a pure fan joy standpoint. Like watching Acuna and Puig in the same outfield is going to be fantastic because Acuna could win the MVP award this year. Like Acuna could win multiple MVP awards over the next several years, but like he plays the game with a flair, and so does Puig, and like that really could be kind of cool. I think that would be neat. So, yeah, Puig, your right fielder in Atlanta now. He replaces Nick Markakis. They need to get Freeman back. He's really an important part of their offense. I'll tell you what I think is a bigger concern for them is the Cole Hamels injury because he had a shoulder issue that was going to limit him for the original opening day. Now he has a triceps injury. And, Hamels has really actually been very durable over the course of his career, with the exception of that little hamstring problem last year. He's had a shoulder thing in the past. But for the most part, he's posted. And that, to me, would be a little bit more of a concern for Atlanta. I do think at some point they'll get Freeman back as soon as he can get a pair of negative tests in a row.
Could we somehow get Tim Anderson and Javi Baez on that team too? And then, man, you'd have like the all swag team.
Look at this, Josh. John is ready to trade Javier Baez.
I know. I know his favorite player.
I didn't say trade.
Sad.
I want to see them all together to see if there's enough oxygen in the field, on the field to.
There absolutely is. For those guys, are you kidding? I mean, Puig just basically replaces Josh Donaldson in the swag factor for Atlanta. I mean, Donaldson plays with a little bit of a chip. So yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see it. I think Puig will be fun there. That'll be great. Their GM Alex Anthopoulos has a relationship with him from his couple of years when he was in the Dodgers front office. So I'm curious to see how that plays out. But like, I love watching Puig, man. He's crazy. He's great.
It's the first time we've had you on since Cleveland announced that they would be looking at their nickname and perhaps changing it. I'm curious because we had a writer on yesterday talking about Washington and the move that they made. And I asked him the question of like, what was the tipping point? Well, with them, it's pretty easy to point to money when you have, Nike and FedEx, everyone's saying like, we're taking our money away. What was the tipping point for Cleveland?
I think they've been trending in this direction anyway. They had retired the Chief Wahoo logo to some degree.
Yeah.
Ahead of the All-Star game. And so I have not seen anything or read anything or had any information that's made it sound like there was some sort of financial pressure for them to do it. It may just be timing more than anything. And really, I think, it's a chance to, I do tend to view a lot of these decisions cynically. I mean, I think it's a chance potentially to sell some new merchandise too. Not that the team necessarily benefits fully from that. A lot of that goes through the league, but there's an overall benefit to that and creating new marketing and ideas behind that. So I think that's some of it. I mean, and I think the timing is right. I mean, I think if you're going to, if Major League Baseball is going to have their 30 general managers stand up with signs that say Black Lives Matter during the draft, and even though they were late, embarrassingly late on the statement on the death of George Floyd and systemic racism beyond it, all of those things are eyewash unless you actually want to make some changes. And so I think more than anything, to me, it's a good sign that Cleveland's ownership thinks that it's something that's important that they want to try and tackle as a result of how we continue to evolve as a society.
Are you team Spiders?
No, I'm not. You know what? I'm team Guardians. So apparently, and I don't know my Cleveland traffic that well, but there are these Art Deco statues that are built into the bridges that are supposed to oversee traffic in Cleveland. Okay. And they're really cool looking. Look it up. People have done some demos of this. Right? Like, it's really unique. It's really Cleveland. It's not like the Rockers. Not that I would mind, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But, like, they're these kind of cool Art Deco statues that, if Art Deco dates to, the 1920s, I mean, that's the first kind of really good run of Cleveland baseball. Like, I mean, I thought that was kind of a cool name that's uniquely Cleveland. I don't think that they're going to go with River Fires, which was my suggestion. But
That'd be pretty good. I'd like that one. Ernest Biner.
It should be the Cleveland Phelps after legendary Cleveland owner Rachel Phelps.
Yes,
famously,
the Cleveland Dorns.
Yeah, or the Roger Dorns. Of course, we're all talking about major leagues.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you. We're talking about the movie.
There's such good references in this movie. It's a great movie.
Mike, I have the most important question for you yet. It's been a long hell year for basically everybody.
No, I don't think football's going to play. Sorry.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. What about college football?
Mike Riley. Sorry.
There it is.
So
never fails.
Get a Mike Riley reference.
I know that I have enjoyed, the random old school sports debates that have just popped up over the last 4 months. So I ask you this.
No, Pete Rose should not be in the Hall of Fame.
I'll save that for next week.
Oh, okay.
Do you want a player to hit 400 just for the takes? Or do you want that to be avoided? Because a guy hitting 400 in a 60-game season and the debate about whether this is legitimate would be hilarious.
Yeah. So the legitimacy debates on this season to me are like, I'd go full Jay Cutler at that moment. It's just like, don't care, right? So yeah, I hope like Luis Rise hits 450 for the Twins. Like I think it'd be great. Clearly not over the course of a season. Although I will say, if somebody hits 74 home runs now, that would be a record. And the ball really seems to be flying. So maybe it would happen. But yeah, I mean, like I think it's fine. Like I don't care about those debates. The players think it's legitimate, and that to me is what matters. They're not going to try any less. Our playoff format doesn't change. Yeah. None of that change. Even if they expanded the playoff format, it would be even tougher to win the championship this year. So none of that stuff really moves the needle with me. It's just, to me, it's like a lazy way to generate talk show callers.
Yeah.
So that's why we'll discuss it on Thursday.
Yeah, screw you, Mike.
Thursday's lazy talk show.
Yeah, it will be. Hey, real quick, speaking of home runs, I'm pretty sure you were around the Cubs in '98. Did you watch the 30 for 30? And if so, were you disappointed by that as I was and a lot of other people were?
I thought it was just boring for the most part.
Right.
Yeah. I think I tweeted this. John, you may have responded to it. My favorite part of the whole thing was like, I forgot that Dave Parker was the hitting coach of the Cardinals in '98. Yeah. And like Cobra at that time, like he was as big as McGuire. And so you think back to when Dave Parker played, like what kind of a freak that guy was as an athlete. Like Dave Parker to me is one of the most, he's on that like borderline, like Hall of Fame. He would be in the all cool player Hall of Fame without a doubt. Absolutely. But like Dave Parker was a monster. I mean, offensively, defensively, stole bases. And he was like 6'5", 6'6", and like 260. And in like 1975. That's the only thing that I kept getting out of it. It was like, oh my God, like Dave Parker just dwarfed everybody that he played with. He doesn't look out of place in today's game. That was my big thing.
Dave Kingman were guys from that era that, physically look like they could be, in today's era. But yeah, the Cobra was, and his swing.
Dave Kingman wasn't nearly as good as Dave Parker, though.
No, that is very true. That is so very true. Not technical question, but broadcasting question. We know that Greg Schulte, Tom Candiato, your radio crew will be doing everything from Arizona. You will too. Will everyone be together at the ballpark in the booth? How are you guys going to work that this year?
So I'm actually going to work from home, but which is what I do when the team's on the road and I'm not anyway. So we're going to actually have me do pre and post from home. We don't have any clubhouse access. So Major League Baseball has created these tiers, right? So tier 1 is the players, coaching staff, medical staff. Tier 2 there's only like 35 people in tier 2, but there might be a photographer in there. It's PR, front office executives. Those are the players, the people that are getting tested every day, right? And then there's tier 3, which are like tests as needed, and mostly it's like take your temperature at the ballpark. Arizona is still a raging dumpster fire when it comes to COVID cases. So it's probably safer for me to work at home. And I'm actually extremely grateful for the organization that they're going to give me that opportunity. Everything that I'm doing is via Zoom anyway. So the manager show every day will be via Zoom. Player interviews will be via Zoom. It's not going to be like I have to be there. So they're going to leave me aside. I'm going to work from home. And then it also has the benefit that if, God forbid, something were to happen where Greg or Steve Berthiaume, our TV announcer, were to get sick, then I'm not exposed to them either, and I can come in and work as well. So that's kind of how the
those guys will be at the ballpark.
They will all be at the ballpark. So now not every team is doing that. I think I've heard the Dodgers. I think Charlie Steiner is going to work from home. Denny Matthews, I believe, is going to work from home.
Okay.
They set him up that way, kind of like what they did with the ESPN for the KBO. And I do think that there's a safety, component, especially for guys that are in their 60s or 70s.
Well, yeah, Denny Matthews. Gosh, he's probably pushing 80, isn't he?
I think it's great that the organization is willing to do that for them. I think that absolutely makes sense. So I'm not scheduled to do any games this year because with Greg still wants to be able to go to the ballpark, and we're not traveling, so it's not a big deal for him, and it gets him out of the house. And I'm sure his wife is thrilled that he's going to get out of the house. So,
and your wife continues to suffer in silence.
Well. She's suffered for 10 years, John. Why should we make this any easier?
I suppose you're right. Well, it's great to have you on just in time for the pennant race on a weekly basis. We'll be back on Tuesdays this year. And
I know you probably got a break, but I got to ask, are you you're a hardcore baseball fan? Is part of you kind of excited for the sprint, like the 60-game sprint that the season is?
Absolutely.
Well, it's going to be cool as hell.
Listen, first of all, I'm just excited that we're going to have something on a daily basis. I've been walking the dog every night, and usually I have a game on.
Right.
And I'm, depending on how the Cubs are doing, Wrigley is either, being drug along really fast or, we're at a leisurely pace. But I've missed that. I've missed that opportunity. So having it back is the most important thing. But yeah, the sprint, absolutely. I read Jason Stark's synopsis a couple of days ago on The Athletic with all of the crazy things that could happen and analyzing 60-game runs. And maybe the Detroit Tigers will be in the playoffs this year. Who knows?
See, here's one of the things that I thought was really interesting. Jason Gay, when the schedule came out from the Wall Street Journal, wrote an article that just said, basically the tenor of it was, what happens if we like it? I think it's a fascinating question, right? What if we're like, my God, this is great. We've never done it any other way. It's just, the only thing we come close is, we're college baseball people, so we get it. That's the only thing that comes close in terms of schedule. What happens if we like this? What does that mean? And I think the answers to that question are fascinating going forward. Because I think it's going to be really cool.
The difference is, though, with college baseball, you play at most maybe 5 games a week or 4 games a week, and it's still over the course of 3+ months, where this is a literal 2-month. On your mark, get set, go.
60 games, 66 days. Let's rock and roll. I think it's so. I think it's going to be as much as I'm concerned, obviously, for the health and safety of everybody that's involved, and that's the major concern. And it doesn't. It's never that far from my mind in talking about this. At the same time, it's man, a sprint of a baseball season could be really cool because we could see some really weird stuff happen, and that would be great. Every game matters 2.7 times more than a regular game.
What did we factor that a 7-game losing streak or a 6-game losing streak is akin to a 19-game losing streak or something like that?
Something like that.
That's gonna be great. A team loses 3 in a row, and it's like an 8-game losing streak.
Which means, what in the world? Which means my blood pressure, which usually is way too high when the Cubs bullpen is involved, now goes up 2.7 times greater.
It's gonna be awesome.
It means for all those times that you've told a caller to not freak out about a 3-game losing streak in baseball, now the freakouts are worth it, right? It's basically you're basically doing Bears postgame. That's what it is.
Steve's the Mariners. They get off to a 3-1 start.
I was gonna say you're not gonna get that usual answer you get from Ferrin when you're like, "Hey, the Mariners are 10-2. Is it too early?" No, it's not.
It's not too early.
You might get that on the Mariners.
All right. Well, like I said, this is the last weekend scheduled not to have major competitive American team sports for the foreseeable future. The key word, schedule. So let's keep the schedule alive and go Cubs go.
Let's hold our breath that everything goes well over the next week.
That's the first most important thing. So,
yes.
All right. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. We'll see you guys next week. Wear a mask.
Mike Ferrin of Sirius XM MLB Radio and the Arizona Diamondbacks Radio Network.
Got a tweet from one Titans Mike. This is a great interview. No static phone or lost phone call. Great job, Stibbs.
Oh, thanks.
Stibbs.
Thank you, Titans, Mike. I
Excellent
appreciate
work
that.
as usual, Stibbs.
I'm a little disappointed tonight. The Cubs are scheduled to televise their inter-squad game, and it's not on the MLB TV schedule.
Why would they make something easy for fans, John? Come on.
Yeah, that's cute.
You're hilarious.
Come on, man. I don't want to watch the damn Royals game. I want to watch the Cubs inter-squad game because at least
I'll find an illegal stream for you, and I'll DM
Whoa.
it to you tonight.
Did you say illegal?
No, definitely not. Edit
he
that
did
out of the
not
radio
say
replay. there.
Illegal?
Illegal at all. All right, we've got more coming up. Michael Brunts will join us in about 25 minutes. 3:45 today. Max Olson still coming up. Nate Klaus coming up. And schedules. How are we going to fix these schedules? How are we going to make these schedules? I got an idea. 1620 The Zone.